Welcome to the Something Corny studio in the heart of Aberdeenshire, Scotland. I'm Elaine Lindsay and I've been a straw worker now for over 35 years. I started all those years ago with just a small kit, very similar to the kit that you have. And I just very quickly got hooked on the craft. I loved the material, I loved the natural material that I was working with. But I was also intrigued by all the stories that went along with a lot of the ideas behind the corn dollies and the harvest tokens and the old-fashioned harvests. My grandfather had been a horseman on the farms locally to here in the 1920s, 1930s, and he did talk to me quite a bit about the old-fashioned harvests. And doing this craft just seemed to make sense for me. It just all fitted very well. So as I say, I started with a small kit and just really worked away. It was a hobby in my spare time as I was bringing up my boys. But then I realised that people were quite keen to see what I was doing. People wanted to buy my work. And over the years, I started to sell pieces. And then about 20 years ago, I established the business Something Corny. And in the past 20 years, I've had some amazing work to do, lovely commissions, working for some of the top fashion houses, working for TV and theatre, as well as individual commissions for clients. I also teach the craft, both here in this country and abroad. And I've been writing some books about the craft too. I'm working on this project with Artist Estella Castle as part of Egham Visions, which is an artist residency established by Egham Museum, and it's funded by the Arts Council in England. Estella is working with the Heritage Craft Association, and she's highlighting several endangered crafts, including corn dolly making and straw work. In this video, I'm going to show you how to make the Egham harvest token. Harvest tokens were very commonplace around the farming communities at harvest time. And before we start learning how to make the token, let's have a quick look to see what the harvest tokens were actually all about. So let's have a look at the favours or the harvest tokens that I've got in front of me. And you'll see there's different shapes, different sizes. The difference between these at the bottom and the ones at the top really are just that the ears have been taken off. Now, some of the older pieces I've seen of these little favours and tokens, it's not always clear if the heads have actually been physically taken off or if just by wearing them on their lapels, in their bonnets, the heads have eventually disintegrated. But obviously, if they don't have the corn ears on, they're much easier to wear and they're not likely to get squashed. And I use some of these designs, this one in particular, as wedding buttonholes. The ones at the top here, because they've got the ears left on, are really quite nice to hang up in the house. So there's many different designs of favours and tokens, and you will find that they do vary as you go around the country. But the favours were always made at harvest time while the men were out in the fields. And I'm saying men, but actually in the old-fashioned harvests, there were great squads of people out in the fields. So men, women, children as well. And when it came to having something to eat, they didn't leave the field. The food was usually taken out to them. So they would sit in the field and have their food. And that's usually when they would find a few spare minutes to make some of these harvest tokens. And they would make them, and quite often you would see them with them popped on their bonnet or on their lapel. And there was various traditions. Some men liked to wear them and they wore them just through harvest and then discarded them. Some men like to wear them right throughout the year until the following harvest. So there was lots of different ways of doing that. But they were also made and then perhaps given out to some other people in the fields, especially, maybe some of the younger folk, and they were given as good luck tokens. And I did actually meet a lady who showed me her little token that she had been given right back in 1949 by a man who at that time was in his 80s, and he made her this little good luck token, and she's just always kept it with her ever since. So they were special little things, and they did mean quite a lot to the recipients. And then, of course, another little story with the harvest tokens is that they could become lovers' tokens. So a young lad who had his eye on a girl would make her a little token and give it to her, and then watch to see what would happen at the church on Sunday or at the harvest Thanksgiving. And if she was wearing it above her heart, then he knew that he could make the next move. And it's in the spirit of this lover's token that has given us an idea that perhaps you would like to dedicate your Egham harvest token to someone special in your life. So it could be your spouse or your partner, it could be a child, it could be a friend, anyone special that you feel deserves a dedication of this sort. And I've chosen to dedicate mine to my son, and you'll see in your kit that you have a label. So I've written about why I want to dedicate this to my son. And I've also chosen to decorate my piece with a little bit of woolen material that has come from my son's first kilt. But you could decorate your piece with whatever you like. So you could use a little ribbon that perhaps a child wore when they were younger. You could decorate it with a little button that belonged to someone. Anything special that you would like to use. This is where you can make your Egham Favour just special to you. So if I clear this away at the moment, then we can have a look at how to start off the Favour. The first thing you will need to do is to prepare your straws. For each harvest token, you will use 8 straws, and in your kit there should be 16, which should mean that you will get 2 favours from your kit. One could be perhaps a little practice, and the second one would maybe be the favour that you send to the museum. So I would recommend preparing all the straws and just make 2 favours at the same time. If you're short of time and you only feel you have time to make 1 favour, then only soak 8 straws. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the bands off of the straws. I prefer, before I soak the straws, to have them out of their ties. Okay. The other thing that you'll need is something to actually put the straws into. And here I've got, it's like a gardening trough, a little window box type trough, something that's long enough for the straws to sit in flat. But perhaps you might want to use the bottom of your bath. And for many years, that is how I worked. But whatever you use, whatever container you use, you need to be able to lie the straws into it so that the straws are not being broken. So lie the straws into your bath, into your trough, whatever you're going to use. And then we're going to use lukewarm water. And I have some here made up in the jug. I'm going to pour it in. Now you'll see right away what starts to happen is the straws will want to float. So what I'm actually going to do, and that's easily enough water. So I'm popping the water, and as you can see, the water's covering everything. It's covering the stems and the heads. And to keep those stems under the water, I'm going to use a small towel. So a tea towel, this is a little hand, sort of finger towel. Anything really that's going to absorb the water and give you a little bit of weight and keep the heads down under the water. And I'm going to leave the straws here for about 3/4 of an hour to an hour and let them soak. And then when it's time, when the 3/4 of an hour is up, I'm then going to take the towel and wring it out, being very careful with the straws, but wring out the towel like that. Get most of the water out. Then I'm going to lay the towel onto my work surface and then carefully lifting the straws out of the water. Now, once they have been soaked, once they've been in the water for your 3/4 of an hour to an hour's time, the straws will soften, and you've really got to be very careful when you're handling them. Don't handle them down here because the weight of the water in the heads will cause them to bend. So always support the heads. And I like to tip them up first and let any excess water run out back into the trough. And then I pop them into a towel. Let's just pop them down. And I'm going to cover them with that towel, like so. And I would just leave them there for another 15 minutes or so, just to soften a little bit more. Once that happens, your straws will then be ready to use. When I'm tying my straws together, I prefer to use a clove hitch knot. And you can see the instructions for this on your sheets, but I'll run through it very quickly using the piece of dowel and the cord, just so that you can see quite clearly what I'm doing. And then I'll tie again using the thread and some straws. So imagine the dowel is your straws and the cord is your thread. So I'm holding the straws, I've got them in my left hand, and I'm going to lay the thread or the cord over the top, and I'm going to anchor it with my thumb. Now I've got a short end here, this end is a much longer end. So the longer end is the one that's going to do all the work. So I'm going to bring the long end round, right round the dowel, and it's going to come to the right hand side of the short end. And then it's going to go around again, but this time it's coming to the left hand side of the short end. Now it's going to then come over the top of the short end, and if I just open a little loop here, I'm going to feed it through here. And then I can close the knot. So you can see there's almost like a little cross here. So you know if you've done the knot correctly. Now this knot doesn't keep bouncing open. So you can then push it into place before you then pull it tight. So you can pull tight, and then just to finish it off, just do a half hitch, left, over, right and under, as you would start your shoelaces. And that will just make sure it doesn't come undone. So that's the way we're going to do the knot. And if I bring the 4 straws in, because we need 4 straws for your plaiting. And then also in your kit, you will have a length of strong thread. You really do need strong thread when you're working with straw, because we want nice tight ties. It gives you a much neater effect at the end. So you can work straight from this reel if you want, or cut yourself a piece about maybe 20 centimetres or so. It doesn't have to be any longer than that. Don't go too long because you'll end up just getting yourself in a knot. So there we go. My thread and my straws are ready. Now, where I actually want to tie the knot is as far up the stem as I can go without going on to the ear. And there is actually a line, I don't know if you can see it from there, but there is a line right at the top of the stem before it goes on to the ear. So always make sure that you keep your thread to this side of the line, the stalk side of the line. But I do want to line up all those lines there, like that. And I want my tie to be up here as close as I can. But to form the tie, I'm going to come down 2 or 3 centimetres. So we're going to do exactly the same as we did with the dowel and the cord. And we're going to lay the thread over the top, and I'm going to anchor it with my thumb, just as we did before. I'm going to take the long end around, and it comes up the right-hand side of the short end. And then I'm going to go again, and this time it's come to the left-hand side of the short end. Now it's going to go over the top of the short end there and through the loop that's been formed. There is only one loop that goes all the way around. So I can now close the knot, but I don't want to tie the knot tight here. So I close it, but don't pull tight. And then I can check that all the straws are sitting as I want them. And then I can push the thread right up to the very end of the straw. I'm going to tuck the straws under my arm so that I can then use both hands to pull tight. And did you see how the ears splay out? That shows you that the knot is tight enough. So watch for the ears splaying out. And then I'm just going to take left thread over right and under. So left over right and under, just as though you were to start your shoelaces. And then close it. Pull tight. Make sure everything is tight. And then take your scissors and trim. And I always like to leave 1 millimetre or 2 from the knot before I trim. Don't go too close to your knot, because you're likely to nick the knot and the knot will come undone during your plaiting. And that's how you're going to tie your straws together. Now that we've got the 4 straws tied together, we can begin plaiting. So we're going to use a little plait called the compass plait. Compass as in north, south, east and west. And so I'm going to open up the straws so that I have the 4 points of the compass. And the little plait really just entails the north and south straws changing places. One's going to go forward, the other one comes back to me. And then east and west are going to change places too. And that's as difficult as this plait gets. So it's forward and back, and then side to side. And then forward and back again, and then side to side. And you keep going. Try and get into a little rhythm. It gives you a much neater plait if you can be quite rhythmical with your plaiting. And one of the questions I'm often asked is, which side do you put the straw to? So for example, if I'm going to move this south straw, it actually goes into its own position, because the south straw here is sitting slightly to the left-hand side of this north straw. So as long as I go straight forward, the straw will fit into its own place, which means that the north straw comes to the other side. So if you have a look here, you can see the little square and the 2 straws sitting side by side. So no crisscross straws, just straight forward and straight back. And you continue in this manner until you have about 14 or 15 centimetres of plait. So if I just do a few more here, I actually have a plait that I have completed, just so that you don't have to watch me complete this one. But I'll let you see what this plait actually looks like. And you can see the lovely texture that we get with it. So if I put this plait down, I'll bring up the plait that I've done at the right length. So once you've completed the plait, and you'll find that you won't be going right to the end of your straws, you will have some straw left. You want to bring the straws back up together again into a little bunch, and we're actually going to tie another knot just above the plait here, and that will save the plait coming undone. So don't let go of these straws until you've got the knot in place. So I'm going to use my thread again and do exactly the same clove hitch as we used to start with. Just make sure it's in the right position, which is just at the end of the plait, and pull tight, and then we'll do left over right and under, like so. And then trim off your threads. Always trim your threads, you get a much neater finish. So again, I'll bring in a second plait just to let you see. So I've gone on and I've completed 2 plaits of the same length. So now that we've got 2 plaits exactly the same length, we can start to form our little harvest token now. So take one of the plaits and bring it round in a loop so that the heads are going to sit over the top of the straws, and the start tie and the finish tie come together. So one on top of the other, and that makes a little loop. Holding this in your hand, so hold the heads, I'm now going to make another tie over these two to hold it together. So another piece of thread, hold on to it there, round, find the little loop that goes all the way round, and close. Make sure everything's sitting neatly. Don't stretch your plait or anything because you will lose that lovely pattern. So just be careful with it. There we go. Pull tight. Trim the threads again. It's easier to trim them now than waiting till the end. And then once you've got one loop, we want to form a second loop, but they're going to form together. So I'm going to take the second plait, pop it through the centre of the first plait, and the end of the plait is going to just sit in at the back. And then I'm going to take the start of the plait round to sit in at the front. Okay, I'll do that again just to let you see. So we've got one loop, and then the second plait, feed in the long straws so that the last tie sits in at the back, and the first tie of that plait just sits at the front. Okay, and then I'm going to make another tie here just to hold everything together. So we now have both loops tied together in the little harvest token shape. Okay, just take your time, especially when you're doing this bit with the knots, that the thread doesn't get caught in the heads, but just a little bit of patience and you'll be fine. So pull tight, finish off that knot, then trim your threads. And here we can see the little harvest token beginning to take shape. Now we've got some uneven straws here, so it's a good idea to even them up a little bit, but also you can cut them with little points on them. And I like to take my scissors up from the back of the straw and trim. And I'm actually trimming them roughly about the same length as the corn ears. So one at a time, I just go from the back and I get what we call a little quill point. Now, one or two of the straws are a bit shorter, but that's not a problem. Just neaten them up. Once you've tied up your token, remember the straws are still going to be damp, so we want to leave them to dry. And in your kit, you'll find that you've been given some pins, and that's so that you can pin out the piece into as good a shape as you can to leave it to dry, because whatever shape it's in as it's drying, that's how it will stay. Everything will firm up a little bit and that's how it'll stay. So what I would do in the workshop is I would use a pin board. Sometimes it's a bit of polystyrene or packing material. Anything where I can pop pins into the piece that I've just done and hold it in position. And today, for this favour, I thought it might be quite a nice idea to use the box that your kit has actually come in. So I'm going to put the favour on the box and get my pins. And the very first pin I'm going to put in is just right in the centre here. Now I don't want the pin to go through any straws because we will see a little hole in the straw and we don't want that. So I make sure when I put the pins through that I go through a gap in the plait, not straight through a straw. So I'm going to do the centre first, and if I do the centre first, that anchors it in place. My second pin I'm going to use to take this edge down so it'll sit nicer, and again through a little gap in the plait rather than on the straw itself. Do the same with the second one, so I'm going to make sure my second loop is actually looking just like the first loop. And I hope you can see, we were talking earlier about lovers tokens. Can you see the little heart shape that we've formed there? The other thing that you can use your pin for is if you have a cornier, and this one is annoying me, it's not quite sitting in the right position. You can't really put a pin through the cornier, but what you can do is move the cornier into a position that you like, and then take the pin straight into the box. So it's not actually going through any of the corniers, it's going into the box, and it's just preventing that ear coming out of place. And then I would leave this really overnight is a good idea. The heads will take longer to dry than the actual plait itself, but I would leave it overnight to dry thoroughly. So once your token has been left overnight to dry thoroughly, we can take it off the box now. Things will have firmed up quite a bit. So just take the pins out very carefully and we'll get rid of the box. And then really we're almost finished. All we need to do now is to add our label onto the token. So I would recommend before you decorate with ribbon or anything, attach the label onto the side of your token. And I'm just doing a little overhand knot to hold it in place like that. And I'm going to trim any excess cord from the tire. So there we go. And then I'm going to pop on a ribbon. Now, as I said before, I'm going to use a ribbon that came from James's kilt. So here I've actually got the kilt material formed into a bow. I've just cut it with some pinking shears and formed it into a bow. And then I could use a little dot of glue or a glue gun and pop it into place like that. But you don't need to use a bow. What you could actually do is I've taken another strip of the material and just tie it round in a knot. So if I pop the material underneath like that, bring it round and just tie a normal knot like so, and then just let the tails hang down. There we go. We can trim the tails if we want to, make them shorter. And because it's kilt material, I'm going to trim up any of the frayed edges to neaten them, and just a little trim. There we go. And it's all ready to be hung up for the exhibition. I hope you've enjoyed making your Egham Harvest token. I know I'll certainly look forward to seeing them all in the exhibition. Maybe this has given you a little glimpse into the straw working world, and hopefully It'll encourage some of you to keep this craft going, explore, find out a little bit more about it, and continue with your plaiting. Thanks for watching.